Walter Sisulu University student Sibongile Mani will be appealing her sentence and conviction. This was after she was handed a 5-year prison term for spending over 800,000 rand of 14 million mistakenly paid into her account by the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS. Some are questioning whether jail time is in fact justified in a case like this. Let's unpack it further. We're joined by a former student leader and social justice activist, Busi Seabe, who joins us via our video link this morning. Busi, there was widespread shock yesterday, certainly on social media, to the outcome in the Magistrate's Court. What's your take on it?
Definitely. I mean, I think more than anything, the shock comes from the fact, thank you for having me this morning. More than anything, I think the shock comes from, the extent and the sanction that was given in the sentencing of Sibongile, and the fact that she's being referred to as a thief, when in actual fact, according to, public opinion and public empathy, she's not considered to be someone who is a thief. And one thing that we need to be able to be cognizant of, and I think something that's very interesting within this case and questions that we're asking ourselves, is firstly, who approved such a large amount of money being transferred into one particular account? We need to be able to understand the mechanisms around who is involved and who should be held liable. We don't believe that it is Sibongile Mani alone who should be held liable for the 14 million rand. But more than anything, I think two things can be correct at the same time. Yes, wrong to spend all the money, or particularly 800,000 or 818,000, knowing where it comes from. And also it is correct that the sentence is harsh and not in the interest of the public, and it doesn't promote restorative justice. It remains a fact that there are various individuals and institutions involved in this matter, and these individuals and institutions facilitated the theft or misappropriation of the 14 million, right? So the individuals I am referring to are individuals within the NSFAS system itself. These are individuals within Walter Sisulu University itself, and also the big player that everyone is not paying attention to is Mali, right? Which is the financial system that the university is currently using in order to process payments. And to some degree, Sibongile's bank as well can be held accountable, because how can such a large amount of money be received by an individual and it's not checked, right?
Yeah.
So it is acceptable that administrators of funds within these institutions have been absolved and continue to absolve themselves also of any and all responsibility of misconduct, and have made it appear as though Sibongile sent herself the money without their knowledge. This entire case, if nothing else, is a blatant example of the kind of criminal syndicates we see within institutions like NSFAS, financial agencies, and amongst university officials. The courts should have seen Sibongile as a vulnerable young black woman who was used as a scapegoat in order to protect and preserve, to a large degree, a growing criminal, network. So we also need to take into cognizance the socio-economic conditions within South Africa. And that should make it easy for us and the courts to also empathize with, Sibongile's situation. If the court could suspend the sentence, for an example, of Mpomukwena last year in November, who defrauded the state of 500 million, right? So this is 500 million. Mpomukwena defrauded the state of 500 million that was meant to improve the lives of thousands. What makes Sibongile's case different, especially considering her actions were not premeditated or planned? We need to ask ourselves, has the state been able to prove without reasonable doubt that Sibongile willfully initiated fraud? Right? So her sentencing is a blatant display of our government through the court systems' failure to prosecute and provide adequate judicial services to effectively and swiftly deal with corruption that continues to cripple our country. In this case, what exactly are the basic principles of justice here?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say that Sibongile Mani desperately needs you on her defense team to argue just in the way that you have done. And the big point that you're making as well, Busi, among several points that you've made already, is that there are a number of players on the sidelines of what happened here when that money was erroneously deposited into Sibongile Mani's account. You know, what's happening to those players? The person who pushed the button, the person who entered all of those zeros when the transfer was being made.
I mean, this is something that, to a large extent, I think, society or the public has a short memory. We, as students during, the Fees Must Fall movement, had long called for the removal of NSFAS as a mediatory system, as a middleman when it comes to funding in universities. Because of issues like this is not the first time. Sibongile, yes, is one instance where, a large sum of money, like 14 million, was sent through. But I know of individuals while I was still at university who received 100,000 rands, 1 million rands, from NSFAS, and were never charged in the same manner that, Sibongile is. So to some degree, we need to ask ourselves, how is this criminal syndicate working? How is it essentially facilitating its, withdrawal processes? How is it being able to manipulate individuals and use students to effectively, instigate criminality, which is what we're seeing. And I think what I'm very disappointed in when it comes to this particular judgment is the magistrate. And the magistrate is very disappointing in the sense that she ignored the report of, the correctional services and the social development, services that recommended a suspended sentence. What is the motivation behind the court ignoring recommendations from correctional services and social development? We don't know, right? And we need to be able to understand that more than anything, the courts need to always try and find mitigating situations, right? And particularly in Sibongile's case, they need to find mitigating situations to prevent Sibongile Mani from direct imprisonment. So both the correctional service and social service report recommended custodial sentence, right, is not suitable for Sibongile, but rather correctional supervision should be one considered for Sibongile. The magistrate decided to go against these recommendations and decided to award Sibongile the direct imprisonment. There was one, there was one alternative and versus the direct imprisonment, but the magistrate chose not to go with it. We need to ask ourselves, what exactly is the motivation behind that? Because if we remind you and we look, correctly to section 27618, if I'm not mistaken, that's the section that she noted, which stipulates the kinds of different forms of sentencing that is available to the magistrate based on mitigating, efforts. She ignored all of that. So we also need to ask ourselves, what is the role of, the judicial system? What is the role of the courts in this entire matter as well? Because yes, we understand that they're trying to buckle down on white-collar crime. But this case does not fall under the jurisdiction of white-collar crime. I mean, maybe legal experts can, come through and give, better motivations. But from my understanding, this particular case does not fall under white-collar crime. And for it to be charged and sentenced like a white-collar crime is very unfair. What about, to a large extent, ESCOM CEO De Ruyter, who mistakenly got paid 5 billion to, exploration, who was undergoing business rescue? The money is still not recouped, right? So there's a lot that is going on within our judicial system, and it seems to be very racially based. It seems that, black people, black women particularly, are receiving harsher sentences, from the courts than their white counterparts. I mean, even politicians themselves are not receiving the same kind of harsh sentences or treatment that, Sibongile has received from the state. To the extent that at this particular point in time, Zweli Mkhize, who's the former health minister, gets to ramp up his bid to become president, but he doesn't get to face the music for misappropriating and misspending, PPE funds. So when you look at, to a large extent, the socioeconomic conditions, when you look at the issues of race, when you look at the issues of, positionality in terms of class position, you understand that Sibongile Mani is a victim more than anything else in this situation, and she needs to be afforded the opportunity to be rehabilitated. Why has the court not given Sibongile an opportunity to repay the money? Because that is an option that was given to, other people who have been found, for an example, to have been mistakenly given money. So for an example, if the service provider in Tamale made the mistake and reimburse the money to, Walter Sisulu University, in addition to providing Sibongile with counseling. Someone needs to help me understand why Sibongile is charged and sentenced as opposed to establishing a repayment plan where applicable.
Yeah.
Why is this? Who's justice?
Yeah, all incredibly important questions. In fact, the issue of white-collar crime featuring quite prominently when the magistrate was reading out the decision in court yesterday, saying that it should be treated as seriously as any other criminal matter. Busi Seabe, let me thank you for your time this morning, former student leader and social justice activist, responding there to that sentence that was handed out to the Walter Sisulu University student Sibongile Mani after that 14 million rand was mistakenly deposited into account, over 800,000 rand.